Welcome to the YAHOWAH blog. I am your host, Craig Winn. We're going to resume with part 7 of our series, In the Garden. This is a time capsule of what happened 6,000 years ago in the Gan Eden, which is the garden enclosure of great joy. YAHOWAH begins his account in terms of his relationship with us after documenting the events of the creative epoch by sharing how he created a garden and placed Adam inside of it, and shared with us again how Adam was like all other animals, with one notable addition, that Adam was given a nasalma, which is a conscience in addition to consciousness. And we listened to all that YAHOWAH had to say about Adam and their relationship and what they did. And then ultimately the point of departure between Adam and Chawah on one side and YAHOWAH on the other, that caused the expulsion from the garden because free will was so necessary in this process. And the reason this whole story is so important for us is that what occurred 6,000 years ago is what is going to reoccur just 8 years and 6 months from now. We are being invited back into the garden. And YAHOWAH, after man has made a complete mess of this planet, and it's going to get exceedingly worse before YAHOWAH makes it better, he is going to terraform planet Earth and restore the conditions throughout the globe to those experienced in Eden, so that we can camp out together for 1,000 years prior to us actually participating with him in the creation of a new universe. So this is the story of our beginning and of the conclusion, the final chapter of our time on earth. And so it's just a marvelous bookend to frame all of the human experience with our Creator, YAHOWAH. So now in part of the 7th episode of In the Garden, I'd like to resume where we concluded our last program. The text reads, Adam summoned and met with, greeting by name, all of the animals and the birds of the sky and every conscious life form of the expansive environment. But there was not found for Adam a helper or supporter similar to and right for him. If you'll recall, in our previous program and In the Garden, we talked about how important it was that YAHOWAH identified that man should not be alone. And so YAHOWAH decided that it was time that he made an adjustment to the nature of the garden, make it more conducive to Adam, and particularly the way that he had designed Adam as a social animal. And in this regard, he had decided that he would introduce Adam to all of the animals that he had created that were outside of the garden, just to see if there was camaraderie with any of them, or with any of them, this kind of relationship that creates synergy, where they were better together than either of them were alone. And so in this case, we find that Adam would summon and greet. And this is from the verb kara. It means to invite, to summon, to welcome, to meet, to read, to recite, to proclaim, and to call out. By name, it says Shem. Shem is such an important word in Hebrew, just as kara is one of the 5 most important verbs in Hebrew, because it's also the basis of the 7 annual Mikra. which is kara plus the Hebrew interrogatory mai, which means ponder the implications of being summoned and invited, of reading and reciting, even ponder the implications of being welcomed to meet our Creator. And one of the more important nouns in Hebrew is Shem. It is used in Rabbinic Judaism to replace Yahweh's name. They will call Yahweh the name as opposed to actually saying his name. He never told anybody that he wanted to be remembered as the name, Hashem. He told everyone who would listen through Moshe that the only way he wanted to be remembered for all time and every generation was as Yahweh. And he even told us how to pronounce his name through the verbal root of his name, which is Haya, meaning to exist. And it says of all of the animals, La Kol Ha Bahima. And animals in the sense of Bahima are any creature with a nefesh, a soul. It's our nefesh soul that makes it possible for animals to be different than plants, and that an animal can observe its environment and then respond, where plants mostly just are existing within the environment. They can't move or observe it or necessarily even respond to it. And in this regard, Adam and all humans are like all other animals, according to God and according to nature, in that we are comprised of the same thing, very, very similar DNA for all living animals. And we all have this, what we call the breath of life in Hebrew. The nefesh, which is our soul, which is our consciousness, is also the Hebrew word for breath. And so there could have been compatibility between Adam and the other animals, particularly since it's apparent in this scenario that Yahweh made it possible for there to be communication between Adam and the animals. So it would make the relationship more, greater depth to it. And these were every conscious life form. Now, here we have both nefesh, which is the Hebrew word for consciousness, awareness. Soul is the term most often used to convey it. And chaya, which is the Hebrew word for life. Now, when he speaks of the expansive environment, ha-sadeh, he is speaking of the area outside of the garden that would have had many other life forms. And then he says, but there was not found, lo matzah, there was not discovered, encountered, or attained for Adam, the man, a helper or supporter, an izir. And that was what he most wanted to accomplish for Adam. He wanted someone to support Adam, someone to assist Adam, someone to have a positive influence and help Adam be more than he ever could have been independently. Similar to and right for him. So ka neged hu. Ka makes associations between things, speaks of corresponding and things that might be considered similar. And neged would be a straightforward counterpart, something that is particularly receptive to him. Barishith, in the beginning, Genesis 2:20. So the point is well stated, and it was previously acknowledged. God created Adam for the covenant relationship. As a social creature by design, it was not good for him to be alone. It is likely that Yahweh's initial preference, let's call it plan A for just Adam, of an intensely personal and interactive relationship with man, perhaps was a bit overbearing. You know, every time that Yahweh has appeared, even in a hugely reduced format, because all of Yahweh obviously won't fit into a person or a hemisphere or even to our planet or our solar system or our galaxy or even the universe. Yahweh has to be a dimension beyond the universe that he created. So Yahweh won't fit into our universe, which is one of the reasons that Christianity is, he was the fullness, Jesus being the fullness of the Godhead. It's just utter and complete nonsense. It makes God no bigger than a man, which is typically the nature of the religious gods. And so when, for example, Yahweh appeared directly to the children of Israel during the Exodus, early part of the Exodus, they were so overwhelmed by his light, his presence, and his voice that they say, whoa, this is too much. We really prefer not to see you again or hear from you. They were intimidated. Now, part of the intimidation, of course, was they knew that they had behaved very poorly up to this point, and that whatever the darkness in them remained was going to cause them to be irascible and argumentative and ungrateful going forward. And when you're in the presence of someone as good, as generous, as compassionate as Yahweh, that, of course, is going to be a very uncomfortable position. It's like you get caught doing something you shouldn't do, and someone turns on the light, and you turn off the light. No, don't look. That kind of thing is what the children of Israel were enduring, and even though Adam was entirely perfect, there was nothing that Adam could even do that would be considered bad. Still, for someone created by Yahweh in his image and his model, but in lesser dimensions, the greatness of God is the perfection of God is going to be a bit overwhelming. And so plan A, all Adam, all the time, needed some augmentation. So as a social creature, Yahweh recognized that plan A wasn't enough. So concerned, compassionate, God went to plan B. Plan B for Bahama, which was for all the various creatures of the open environs, which was therefore going to help fulfill Adam's need for companionship with other animals and other living souls in addition to his time with Yahweh. And while God was overwhelming for Adam in plan A, none of the Behemah were adequate in plan B. Now, the very fact that we read this would imply that Yahweh created Adam and placed him in the garden and wanted to have a one-on-one relationship with him, but found out that it wasn't enough because either Yahweh had to be with him 24/7, which gave him no room to breathe, no chance to even be apart from Yahweh, therefore no freedom, no free will. And without free will, there can't be a reciprocal relationship or love. And that he went to plan B, which was maybe there's an animal out here that is going to be rewarding, engaging, entertaining for Adam, and found out there were none that were appropriate. Clearly, Yahweh either knew or could have known that he would have to go to plan C, and he would have known or could have known that plan C was going to also create issues. So that puts us in a position where if we're thinking about it, we have to accept a very limited number of options in this regard. Option number one is that, yes, Yahweh knew that plan A wasn't going to be satisfactory for Adam, and that plan B was also inadequate, and that plan C was going to blow up in everyone's face. Plan C is for Towrah. And that that he knew all of these things, but it was still appropriate to go through the process so that each of the alternatives was given the opportunity to play out. We recently faced a rebellion. And when it first came up, Yahweh said to me, just ignore it for a bit. And that is because it hadn't played out yet. It was obvious that it was occurring, but it hadn't become debilitating in terms of its kind of the mean-spirited outreach that they began to project. And so the answer was, let it play out. Yahweh knew exactly how it was going to play out, but it would not have been appropriate to expose and condemn what was occurring prior to them actually doing what it was obvious they were going to do. So yes, I knew what they were going to do. Yahweh knew what they were going to do, but you can't say that isn't appropriate until they actually do it. And very much the same here. So he tried plan A. He couldn't just go to plan B and plan C and start with plan C, since he knew that plan A and plan B were going to be inadequate without having it actually play out. And so this was an essential part of the process. Now, there's another option, that rather than knowing what was going to happen, well, God could have known. He could have gone forward in time and see how all of this was going to play out. He chose not to. And I think it's highly likely that that is the case. And the reason I would say that is that if Yahweh knew all the steps along the way that take us from one place to another, he has a 7,000-year plan that began in the garden and ends with us back in the garden. And there are points along the way that God clearly saw in advance and helped position everything properly so that those seminal events would play out in accordance to our interest and his. But all of the minutia along the way isn't something that he has chosen to see or to hear. It's why he tells us on occasion, I'm aware of that, but other than that, I'm going to heaven, and I'm just not going to pay attention to this for a while. And the reason for that is, if he knew every aspect of a relationship before it happens, there would be no purpose of that relationship. Why create us to be his children if he knows everything we're going to do before we do it? It would take all of the enjoyment out of growing together and doing things together and exploring together. So God would specifically preclude himself from knowing that. There are many things that God is on record saying that he is precluded from knowing. For example, whether it be Abraham's or Moshe's or Dode's or mine, the things that we have done that are far less than ideal. The whole nature of Dode taking our guilt and depositing it into Sheol, never to be seen again, means exactly that it doesn't exist in a place that is retrievable, that is perceivable, and therefore God can't even see it. And so Abraham, who was a bit of a scallywag in some of his behavior, God still loves him. And he loves him because all he sees is a son that embraced what he was offering. And the same would be true with Yishak and Jacob. Same would be true with Moshe and Dode and yourself, if you're part of the covenant family, and myself. So there are things that God just doesn't see because he's committed to not seeing. And there's other things he does not see because he wants to enjoy them as part of the process. Well, if it's someone like Dode, or even this job that I'm doing now at this late date, he still has to know how the big events are going to play out and make certain that we're equipped to accomplish the overall mission, because otherwise it would deprive both Yahweh and Yisrael of what he's offering. So these are also possibilities. The third possibility is a blend of those first two, but that this whole narrative is put here for us to go through the thinking process, so that we understand these insights into our nature and to the nature of the relationship Yahweh is establishing with us. So that is not, no matter how we pursue our conclusions regarding the proper perspective on these things, we ought not disregard plan A and B. They were both exemplary. They were both wonderful. They were both exceedingly possible and exceedingly productive, pleasing. They were, however, not totally ideal or completely satisfying. But they are, in fact, still in place, both of them. Independently, intimidating, or inadequate, they are now contributory rather than abandoned. For example, to devote sufficient attention to complete, I should say, the assigned mission before time ran out. Yahweh saw to it that I was reasonably isolated. I stepped away from virtually all my friends. I even distanced myself in terms of time from my family as my children grew up and went off to college and started their jobs. And I because my ex was so depressing, I even bought houses across the country so I could be where she was not. And that gave me the ability to be exclusively with Yahweh, to get up in the morning and write and continue to translate and write into the night. And I was very prolific when it was just the two of us. But God realized that without a female companion, a supporter, a helper, my writings would lack passion, might even lack a sense of compassion, even the proper perspective and focus, and that life would lose some of its beauty and charm, also some of the struggle. And so to write of the covenant family and to address God's great love for his people, as well as his tremendous frustration at his constantly fractured family, God would not only have to provide an ideal companion and counterpart, but he would also have to assure that I felt the sting of familiar fissures. And everyone who has been chosen to speak for Yahweh endured this. And if you don't endure it, you're just a Pollyanna out there. You're somebody without grit, somebody who can't keep it real, someone who doesn't have empathy. I mean, what's the worst thing when somebody gets themselves in a situation where life is difficult because a spouse has left them, because a child has acted in a terribly rebellious manner, where somebody that they befriended and supported turned against them, and you've never had anything but roses and tulips and daffodils and rainbows all your life. What could you possibly offer them? How could you possibly speak of Yahweh's frustration with his covenant family if you haven't experienced loss and overcome it? And so it was important to have separation, to feel the frustration when family members do things that are really hurtful and inappropriate, just as they have done to all of Yahweh's chosen implements and to Yahweh himself, while at the same time experiencing true love, as Yahweh has clearly experienced with his beloved Dode. So I think you're listening to the result of the sum total of all of these things. Now, since I'm Mr. Insight, I just love to plumb the possibilities. I mean, I don't think, in fact, I'm quite certain that there's no one who has read and translated the 3 or 4 passages that preceded this, who have gone into such depth to explain the possibilities and the insights and why these things are meaningful, as I'm doing here with you. And the reason I'm doing it is that each stone we turn over, each word that we examine as a jewel, each time we look at this from a slightly different perspective, the same text, but from a slightly different angle, there are additional insights that can be gleaned. And all of these insights have value. They help to provide a more vivid and accurate picture of who Yahweh is, what he's offering, and what he expects from us in return. So I don't think anyone has previously considered that the fact that when Yahweh grasped hold of this man and he placed him in the garden, and since now Yahweh was introducing him to every significant ambulatory animal and bird that he had created, Adam was not only introduced to life forms outside of the garden, one of those life forms would have been human, albeit without a nasama. Animal man. If you want to know what animal man looks like, go and look in the streets and the campuses around this world where there is this huge immoral and ignorant and irrational upheaval where the victims of genocide are being blamed for genocide, where the victims of colonization, of oppression and subjugation are being accused of the very things that has been done to them. If you want to see animal man, look at those who fled out of Gaza and in pursuit of rape and plunder. If you want to see animal man, look at the parades that transpired in Gaza when fellow animal men were released from prison after they had raped and murdered little girls. Animal man still exists. And in this particular case, it's apparent that Yahweh introduced Adam, which was Nasalma man, with a conscience, to animal man without one. Adam was therefore introduced to another man and therefore to another woman. And it means that the men and women without a Nasama conscience, without direct and accurate knowledge of God, are diminished and are of no interest to someone who has experienced both. And as for those who are cognizant of such terminology, this also suggests that Adam was the first sapiosexual. Now, that's a term. My wife is chuckling because she and I are similar in this regard, which is that our connection was intellectual. We knew each other 8 years just on the internet with by no images. I don't think there was a single picture. No, I know there was no picture of either of us, but I don't even think there was a single graphic image of so much as like she would talk about acacia wood and what it means, and the nature of an ant colony, and how they teach us lessons when Yahweh brings them up. I don't even think she even had an illustration of any of those things. It was strictly words. We communicated with words about the profound insights that can be derived from Yahweh's Torah and prophets. And so our attraction was intellectual. And this suggests this idea that he was introduced to animal woman, but animal woman didn't have a conscience, the ability to be discerning and judgmental, be moral, and that was not appealing, not satisfactory to Adam. So in his case, his mind needed to be engaged before his heart. And that is an important lesson for all of us. That is the lesson that Israel did not learn as it related to doing this deal with the devil and releasing hundreds of Islamic jihadists and murderers for the release of innocent children. It will come back to haunt them in a manner where not only were the family members of those Muslims who had raped their children, who had raped their daughters, released and were now celebrating. Think about the heartache that you perpetrated needlessly, inappropriately on those families to release an innocent victim, that knowing that the people you released are going to kill far more than what you just saved. It was a case that was the opposite of this one, of the heart ruling the head rather than the head ruling the heart. So this is somewhat similar to how our relationship with Yahweh began. It is how we fell in love with his son. Words and ideas can be stimulating and alluring. We came to know and love Dode through the Mizmor that he had scribed about his relationship with Yahweh. Now, back in Eden, it is evident that God and man had a marvelous time together. They no doubt burst out laughing at the introduction of the platypus and the aardvark. And they may have chuckled at the curiosity of the raccoon, the cunning of the mongoose, the ornery attitude of the Tasmanian devil and wolverine. But no matter the loyalty of canines, the likability of sheep, the elegance of the giraffe, or the majesty of the lion, God would do one better for man. And so plan C was for Towrah. Yahweh conceived the ultimate masterpiece, intelligent woman. I think many of you know that on my Facebook site, after being told that by the builder of the hive that I had lost my family, I said, well, this is what losing looks like. Posted a picture of my wife, Leah. So intelligent woman is indeed a magnificent thing. But before I read this text, I want you to also think about this possibility. There's plan A, plan B, and plan C, all taking place in a matter of sentences here in the garden. Plan E is Adam alone. Plan B is Adam with other life forms. And plan C is Adam with Towrah, intelligent woman. There are three epochs that separate the great events in our history with God. We were with God, just us together, for in the garden. It would then be 40 Yobel, 2,000 years, and then Yahweh would establish another very close and personal relationship with a single individual, and brought his wife, Sarah, into this relationship, and they conceived a son. So we went from a single individual to a single individual who became a single family. And it was exactly 40 Yobel, or 2,000 years to that point, and this is when the covenant was conceived. That was from 3968 BCE, year 0 Yah, to 1968 BCE, year 2000 Yah. So what happened 40 Yobel thereafter, and at the end of the second great epoch? You come to 33 CE, year 4000 Yah. And Yahweh, through his beloved son, Dode, he enables the benefits of the covenant family so that the covenant family can be hundreds, if not thousands, could even have been millions of us if enough people listened. And even now, if enough of you begin to listen and understand these great epochs, understand what God is attempting to achieve and is offering you and expects in return, there can be millions. But he opened up the possibilities of the covenant relationship. He literally established it through Dode by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim in year 4000 Yah, 33 CE, exactly 40 Yobel from the time that Abraham and Yishak ascended Mount Moriah, doing so again 2,000 years later on Mount Moriah. the end of the second epoch. The third is just 8.5 years from now is when it will conclude. And what we find is that all along we have been inundated with all manner of animals. In fact, I don't think there's ever been a time where humankind has been subjected to more animals, ruthless men devoid of a conscience. Animal man could even be religious man. Animal man is political man. And animal man became so inappropriate that animal man essentially has to go. Yahweh has to remove religious man, remove political man, remove militant man from the face of the earth for the planet to survive and for him to restore Eden back to the conditions that it was found. So 2,000 years, 40 Yobel from 33 CE is 2033. And that is when he is returning on Yom Kippurim, October 2nd of 2033. That is the third epoch where at that point, all that is left is Nesama man and woman. And this perfect relationship, ideally structured for us to get the most out of life. So it's very possible that these plan A, plan B, and plan C are symbolic of all of this and where we are going. The text reads, as a result, Yahweh Almighty caused the man, Adam, to fall deeply asleep. And deeply asleep is tahdima, to be in a supernaturally induced sleep, similar to being under anesthesia. And while he slept, he grasped hold, he selected and took one of his ribs from his side, min Tesla Hu, his bones and cartilage from near and around his lungs. And he sutured up the place beneath it with living tissue. Bereshith in the beginning, 2:21. Before we go on here, some interesting insights. First of all, this time, rather than showing Adam other animals that were actually conceived prior to humankind being conceived, we were the last of the mammals God designed. Unique in that we stand upright, unique that we have to form communities and marriages, really, bonding together to create a home for shelter. And we have to raise our children so that we nurture them for prolonged periods of time. Very, very unique creature. The only one with opposable thumbs so that we could wield tools, and also with the vocal capability to communicate not only with the tools and writing, but with words. And so here we are as this upright creature, capable of all of that kind of thing. And yet these were all animals created before man, as opposed to an animal created out of man. And so this approach was going to be that Towrah, this woman, was going to be his equal. She would literally be out of man, from his very substance. So this notion that in so many religions that men lord over women, as they do in Christianity, or that they treat women as property, as they do in Islam, is contrary to this idea that Towrah was Adam's counterpart, taken right out of his midsection, right next to his heart and right near where his lungs breathed in the breath of life. Fascinating. And of course, the Hebrew word for rib or side is the name of the car company today. So I hope that Elon Musk has a copyright on it, because it's Tesla. And then he sutured up, placed beneath it living tissue. Then Yahweh Almighty constructed with the rib that which, to reveal the benefits of the relationship, he had taken from the man, Adam, conceiving a woman, female to be a partner, Isha. And he brought her to the man, Adam. Bereshith, Genesis, in the beginning, 2:22. So this woman was not just made for man, she was made of man. And that means she came with a nasalma, a conscience. She was worth getting to know. She was worthy of being loved. Now, Yahweh could have selected an existing woman, Homo sapien, for Adam among the thousands scurrying about outside of the Garden of Eden, but he didn't do so, and I think for obvious reasons. Without a Nasama conscience, she would have been vastly inferior to the man conceived in God's image, just like all other animals. They would have had nothing to talk about or anything meaningful to build or achieve together. As an outsider, she would have been inappropriate, destroying Eden's purpose, because she would have brought in all of the experiences of pain and suffering, death, dying, all of these things. Might even brought in mosquitoes, which could not have been in paradise. No paradise I'm going to is going to have a dadgun mosquito. And, that's another insight worth considering, because the implications truly are profound and prolific. What is paradise? Similarly, the set-apart spirit is a part of God. It literally integrated into Yahweh's nature. The set-apart spirit is Yahweh. And she can be set apart from him to achieve the purpose of association or support, or to inspire us, to help us be more than we would otherwise be on behalf of the covenant family. But she literally is part of Yahweh. Now, that where that particular metaphor falls apart is that Yahweh took this rib out of Adam, and then he created a separate consciousness. The set-apart spirit does not have a separate consciousness. She is simply Yahweh. Yahweh's spirit, set-apart spirit, is spirit. It's the spirit of Yahweh. Now, at her best, and from her inception, Yahweh was conceived as part of Adam. And also in a more plebeian sense, the rib was selected because it surrounded the heart, which is in all ancient cultures and languages was the seat of judgment. It's the liver that in ancient cultures was the seat of emotions. And it also surrounded the lungs, which were synonymous with the breath of life, which in Hebrew is a nefesh, soul. Adam clearly understood the intent, and he appreciated the gift, as should we. And so it was once again by accepting what occurred here 6,000 years ago that we witness our future while coming to know ourselves and Yahweh a little bit better. We also learn that God is offering it, and what he expects in return. When our eyes are open and our minds are discerning, we discover the basic framework of Yahweh's approach to us as foretold in this place and time. It's a pause here just for a moment and share with you that there is so much that is evident in this whole process of coming to know, processing that information, and then coming to understand. My wife and I were talking about Solomon this morning. Solomon asked Yahweh for wisdom, for chakma. And Yahweh said, because you asked for wisdom as opposed to long life and riches and, many sons and all that sort of thing, the mundane things, you ask for something that is really the key ingredient that we humans have, the capability that Nasalma man has, and you wanted to have it serve you and your people well. that he gave them all these other things. And so you find that in the first 10 years, Solomon was really adept at using his Nesama and this very fast processor that Yahweh gave him so he could be insightful. The whole story of the argument over the baby. And he says, well, then let's just saw the baby in half. We'll give you each half of it to determine who the actual mother was. These kind of insights where when he dedicated Yahweh's home for his name on the top of Mount Moriah, and then he explained the arrival and why it was important of the Nakri, the observant foreigner for God's people at this time. Brilliant insights. But somewhere along the way, he stopped using his Nesama. He stopped capitalizing on Chakma. And this fact is, he still had a fast processor, but if you don't use it with the right perspective, with the right attitude, it can lead you astray faster than anything. It's like a supercomputer, but it's processing all erroneous data. And in Solomon's case, he was processing the data that he was inundated with all of the foreign women that he brought into his harem that were exceedingly religious. And so it was clunk, 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 fast, 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 but nothing but rubbish on the output. Garbage in, garbage out. It was just that in his case, it happened a little faster than it would happen with other people. And it's very much like, therefore, Solomon is the embodiment of Yisrael. Jews have 15 IQ points on average above normal people. And if you realize that the average is 100, the average Jewish IQ is 115. That's why there's a ridiculously disparate percentage per capita of the most acknowledged inventors and award winners in human history that are Jewish. And you can compare that to very similar ethnicity with the Arabs. And the average IQ of Muslims, Arab Muslims, is about 70. And the average IQ of people in general is about 100, and of Jews, average is about 115. And so God gave his people a fast processor, the ability to be discerning and to exercise good judgment. But you can be exceedingly bright, as so many people are, and render immoral and irrational decisions. Because there has to be something more to it. There has to be this Nesama functioning as a conscience, this ability to differentiate between right and wrong, good and bad, fact and fiction. And so few people have that today. They don't review information judgmentally or morally. And that's what happened with Solomon. That's what's happened to a large extent with the Jewish people. So, in this particular case, we know that Towrah had an exceptionally fast processor because she was given a Nesama. Unfortunately, she didn't exercise it the way she ought to, and it would run into trouble. But at this very moment, then the man said, so this is Adam's now response to the gift of Yahowah, Towrah. His eyes and his heart and his little mind, they were just running a million miles an hour. He says, this is the way to conduct one's life. This panam is the pattern of behavior to be followed, the motivation to push forward. This is the persistent heartbeat of life. It's the stem, it's the essential nature, the very skeleton upon which human life hangs, the substance and essence of an upright life. Out of my essence, my esteem, my very bones, and essential human nature, a living being capable of communicating intelligently, a bashar, for my desire to share positive thoughts with humanity. Again, men, Bashar, Ani. For this reason, she shall be greeted, welcomed, and called Kara, woman, Isha, because out of man, Ish, she was taken. Lakaksh. This was obtained, selected, and received. Barishif, in the beginning. Genesis 2:23. Best gift ever. One of the great speeches of all time. Yeah. I was really talking about getting your act together. I mean, that is really an impressive statement. And there was even a prophecy in it. So it's impressive. So let's just run through it again, just because it is. It's just one of the great responses of all time. I might have just said, wow, or oh, ho, ho. I like. But, can you imagine? You're a guy, you've been all alone. All you've seen is, is rabbits and putty cats and platypuses. And up walks Towrah. And, I'm sure his eyes, they bulged out and said, "You, wow." But you'll notice he hadn't even said a word to her yet. So some of this was definitely projecting. He was projecting what he thought that Yahweh was going to be providing for him, since Yahweh had said, this individual I'm creating for you is going to be mutually supportive. So the man Adam said, this is the way to conduct one's life. Yep, we ought not be alone. Men and women should come together. We are better together. This is the pattern to be followed, the motivation to push forward. This is the persistent heartbeat of life. Great line. It's the essential nature, the stem, the skeleton upon which human life hangs, the very substance and essence of an upright life. Out of my essence, my stem, my very essential human nature. Oh, and then the next word, Bashar. Bashar in Hebrew as a noun is typically communicated as flesh, body, animal nature, or even as human, depending on its context. Bashar. But that neglects the fact that virtually every Hebrew noun is defined by its actionable root. And Bashar is a verb. As a verb, Bashar means to communicate intelligently. It's to herald a message. It is to proclaim the good news. It is to be even verbose, to use and to wield words wisely. The one who makes an announcement and proclaims the message that the world needs to hear is a Bashar. The Bashar really works beautifully too in Yahweh's overall plan. There are a number of men who were Bashar, who communicated God's message intelligently. An example would be Moshe, who led the children of Israel out of religious and political slavery and to the edge of the promised land, but whose nefesh was able to tour the promised land, but whose Bashar was kept from it. And it was kept from it because he missed an insight, and I don't know how he would have ever known this was important. But he lashed out at and struck the crag that through which the living waters would emerge, rather than speaking to it. And so his Bashar was left out of the promised land, while his nephesh was flown all through it. He got the greatest tour of the promised land and the history of humanity because Yahweh exposed the entire thing to his nephesh soul. But his bashar was left behind. Then we get to the second man, who was also a Zeroah, cultivating the ultimate harvest, the sacrificial lamb of God, Dod. Dod's bashar was used to fulfill Pesach. And then Dod's nephesh would go on to provide us with the ultimate gift to perfect us by taking our guilt into Sheol, and then his nephesh returned to the Father. And of course, Dod was the ultimate bashar in the verbal sense, and that he did the best job of intelligently communicating the message that God was conveying to humanity. A bashar in life, a bashar through the mikra. So there is the third Zeroah. His title is that he is the bashar of Dod, the bashar of Yahowah. His job is to herald their return, to herald their accomplishments, to awaken Yisrael by communicating their message, father and son's message, intelligently. Even Moshe's and Dod's and Yahweh's message as intelligently as it can be conveyed. He is the living embodiment of bashar as a verb. And wouldn't you know it, he too is going to offer his bashar, physical body, on Towrah to prepare the mortal remnant of Yisrael to celebrate life forever in Yahweh's presence. So they're prepared for the return of father and son. Bashar is not just written here, it's written back to back. Bashar, men, Bashar, Ani. Out of man would come the Bashar, herald, to share these positive thoughts with humanity. For this reason, she shall be Kara. Kara is the basis of Mikra. It's Mikra, as I said moments ago, is the interrogatory my, which means to ponder the implications of something. Kara, being invited, summoned, welcomed, to meet, to read, to recite, to proclaim, and to call out. So she shall be greeted, welcomed, and called. Kara, invited and summoned, designated and known as a woman, Isha, a female, because out of man she was taken. Ish and Isha, the difference is the feminine ending with ah. And we see Isha presented throughout the Kara, the Mikra, as something that we are asked to approach and come near. And there are, with the same letters here, we have two ways of defining Isha. Isha, written exactly the same way, is woman, female, or fire. Ish is masculine fire. Isha is feminine fire. Ish is masculine. Isha is feminine. And so we are invited to come into the more feminine aspect of Yahweh's light during the Moed Mikra. Because out of man, Ish, she was grasped, obtained, received. It's really a stunningly beautiful statement. One of the most brilliantly written and presented anywhere in the Torah. So it means that Adam was obviously very bright and articulate. It has been my observation as I look at written texts, which memorialize human intelligence, because words are the ultimate tools and they are the symbols of our intelligence. I look at what was written 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, what was written 1,000 years ago, what was written a few hundred years ago, and what we write today in our tweets and our sound bites. And the difference is monumental. If you read a book that was written by a scholar in the 17th or 18th century and you read one that is written today, they're monumentally different. I like to write long sentences because I like the ability to shade every nuance in that sentence so that you see how the big picture all comes together and how these things are related to one another. But people can't process long sentences anymore. And a few hundred years ago, you could write a sentence that was a paragraph long. Today, you get beyond 6 or 7 words and people are choking on it. Back in the day, a paragraph could be 2 or 3 pages because all of these thoughts were related. They all belong together. But if you create a paragraph now that's more than 3 or 4 sentences, you'll have lost most readers. If you look at the vocabulary used in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century, I've got a fairly robust vocabulary, and there's words I have to look up. And now I communicate, and I'm constantly told people have to have a dictionary and other tools beside them just to know what these words mean. We have degraded intellectually. We have devolved. And so Adam was clearly very bright. He was clearly articulate. Now, going back at that time, I might have been way too distracted. My wife will know with the accoutrements to be lucid. You know, she will walk up sometimes and do a quick show and tell, and she just seems I turn into mush. Just the yowza might have been my the best I could have done at the time. So can you imagine being introduced to someone so beautifully, so perfectly designed, so intelligent and conversant, although he had to assume that because he was projecting what he had experienced with Yahowah on her. And so helpful and fun, again, he's projecting what Yahowah had been like with him and had told him he was going to do. But projecting what he perceived God was going to do and this visual image that he now had before him, and him telling you that, God telling you that he created her especially for you. This is your gift. Goes right back to the thing I tell my wife all the time. She is God's gift to me. And she wants to argue this point needlessly and say, no, you're God's gift to me. And no. Says it right here. That's the end of the argument. You're God's gift to me. So I don't know if anyone of us could have done as well. In fact, I'm certain there's none of us that could have done that well. Even with 1,000 tries, we couldn't do as well. Plan C was a winner. Well, at least initially. Adam had been taught by the best. His declaration, this is the way to conduct one's life. Its essential nature. This is sublime. He is saying that together a man and a woman serve as a picture of the covenant, which is the entire reason for the creation of the universe and the conception of life. And this is why Bashar is a living being able to communicate intelligently. It was Adam's Bashar desire to share these positive thoughts with humanity. Bashar is as much about being comprised out of living tissue as it is being filled with meaningful and uplifting words and ideas that we want to share. Therefore, to tell his story in a way that we could not miss, woman was created to live with man. We would understand love. We would value affection. We would appreciate a caring relationship. We would come to enjoy stimulating conversation. We would also appreciate the merits of working together to achieve something worthwhile. And what could be more worthwhile than conceiving and raising children? More than this, together, men and women would build a home, conceive offspring, raise them. They would teach and guide their progeny, lifting them up so they would love Yah. This man, this woman, were the essence of the bereth. It is estim, the very foundation for living, the essential substance of an upright existence. Estim speaks of our backbone, and pa'am, the way we should conduct our lives. Each word is a diamond, radiating the full spectrum of the rainbow. Now, this is probably a wonderful spot for us to pause. Looking forward to taking you into episode 8 of In the Garden, because this is exciting. There's so much we can learn. We can celebrate life with our very Creator in the very presence of Him conceiving the ideal relationship with us, letting us know why we are here, who He is, what He is offering, what He expects in return. How do we get the most out of life? How do we give the most back and advance the purpose of life? It's all here for us to consider. Well, I am Craig Winn. This has been episode 7 of In the Garden as part of the YAHOWAH blog.